What if we told you that one of the most powerful empires in history collapsed without a single shot being fired? That's right, we're talking about the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, better known as the USSR. At its zenith, the USSR was a titan, a behemoth that dominated global politics. Its influence was far-reaching, its military might unparalleled, and its ideology a beacon to the proletariat worldwide. Yet, in a twist of fate, this empire, this superpower, unraveled in the most peaceful manner. No wars were waged, no lands were annexed, and no blood was shed. The world looked on in awe as an empire that once stood tall, crumbled like a house of cards. This peaceful collapse of such a colossal entity was, and still is, a unique event in our shared history. So, what exactly led to the downfall of this superpower? Stay tuned as we delve into the unraveling of the USSR. The roots of the USSR's collapse can be traced back to the 1980s, a tumultuous decade marked by a series of events that sowed the seeds of discontent among the masses. The socio-political climate of the time was one of uncertainty and disillusionment. The Soviet Union was in the grip of a severe economic stagnation. The centralized, planned economy that had once brought rapid industrialization was beginning to falter. Shortages were commonplace and the standard of living was far from ideal. The Soviet citizens who were promised prosperity were instead met with scarcity, and this disparity between promise and reality began to gnaw at the trust people had in the system. Then, in 1986, the Chernobyl disaster struck. The nuclear meltdown not only resulted in an unprecedented environmental catastrophe, but also exposed the systemic flaws within the Soviet administration. The government's delayed response and attempts to downplay the severity of the incident only served to fuel public anger and mistrust. Adding to the internal struggles was the Soviet-Afghan War. Launched in late 1979, the war stretched on for nearly a decade, draining both the Soviet economy and morale. It was a conflict that the USSR could neither win nor withdraw from without losing face. The war was unpopular among the Soviet citizens who saw their sons, brothers, and husbands return in coffins, while the government seemed to be in a state of denial about the human cost. These events, economic stagnation, Chernobyl, and the Afghan War, were not isolated incidents. Rather, they were interconnected threads in the tapestry of Soviet decline. Each event, in its own way, chipped away at the authority of the Communist Party, fostering disillusionment and dissent among the people. These initial cracks would only widen with time, leading to a pivotal decade of change. Enter Mikhail Gorbachev, a man whose policies inadvertently sped up the USSR's demise. Gorbachev, ascending to power in 1985, was a breath of fresh air for a nation stifled by decades of hardline totalitarian rule. He brought with him two key policies that would forever alter the Soviet Union: glasnost and perestroika. Glasnost, or openness, was Gorbachev's answer to the deep-seated corruption and inefficiency plaguing the Soviet system. It allowed, for the first time, criticism of government officials and policies. Suddenly, citizens were given a voice, and they used it to express their discontent with the status quo. Alongside glasnost, Gorbachev implemented perestroika, or restructuring. This was a radical economic reform aimed at transitioning the USSR from a centrally planned economy to a mixed one. The goal was to stimulate economic growth and improve the standard of living. However, the sudden shift resulted in economic instability, with many citizens facing shortages and price hikes. These two policies, while well-intentioned, had unintended consequences. They led to widespread dissatisfaction among the Soviet people, who were now more aware of the system's flaws and had the freedom to voice their discontent. The economic turmoil only added fuel to the fire. Moreover, the newfound openness allowed for suppressed nationalistic sentiments to resurface among the various Soviet republics. They began to call for greater autonomy, and in some cases, outright independence. Thus, the seeds of dissent sown by glasnost and perestroika grew into a wave of separatism that swept across the USSR. The irony of Gorbachev's reforms is that they were meant to strengthen the Soviet Union, yet they ended up accelerating its downfall. By loosening the reins of control, Gorbachev inadvertently exposed the deep cracks within the Soviet system, cracks that would soon lead to its collapse. While Gorbachev sought to reform the USSR, he ended up setting the stage for its disintegration. By the late 1980s, the USSR was teetering on the brink of collapse. The decade had been marked with economic struggles, political unrest, and growing public dissatisfaction. The cracks in the foundation of the USSR were not just apparent, they were widening. In the midst of this turmoil, a series of events unfolded that would ultimately accelerate the USSR's downfall. One such event was the Baltic Way, a peaceful political demonstration in the summer of 1989. Over 2 million people joined hands, forming a human chain stretching across the three Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. This remarkable act of unity and defiance was a clear message to the Soviet Union. Their control over these states was waning. As the Baltic states were asserting their independence, another monumental event transpired. The fall of the Berlin Wall in November of 1989 symbolized the end of an era. This concrete barrier, which had divided East and West Germany for nearly 3 decades, came tumbling down. The wall's destruction served as a powerful symbol of the crumbling Soviet influence in Eastern Europe. The final nail in the coffin came in the form of the August coup of 1991. This was a failed attempt by a group of hardline communists to seize control of the Soviet government from President Mikhail Gorbachev. The coup's failure further weakened the already fragile Soviet Union, and it was clear that the USSR was on its last legs. Throughout these final years, the USSR was marked by an air of inevitability. The central government was losing its grip on power, the economy was in shambles, and the people were calling for change. The once mighty Soviet Union was unraveling at a rapid pace. By December 1991, the USSR was no more. The red flag of the USSR was lowered for the last time, marking the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter for the countries that were once part of this vast empire. The collapse of the USSR had profound and far-reaching consequences. Imagine a grand tapestry, intricately woven over 7 decades, suddenly unraveled. The fallout was as diverse as it was dramatic, affecting millions across the globe. In the immediate aftermath, the 15 former Soviet republics found themselves independent, yet grappling with a legacy of centralized control and economic turmoil. The Russian Federation emerged as the USSR's primary successor, a phoenix rising from the ashes of the old world order. However, the transition was far from smooth. The 90s were marked by severe economic instability, political corruption, and a sharp decline in living standards for many. Within the broader expanse of the former USSR, the story was similar. Countries like Ukraine, Belarus, and the Baltic states faced monumental challenges in their journey towards establishing functioning market economies and democratic institutions. The transition was often painful, marked by hyperinflation, unemployment, and the erosion of social safety nets. But the collapse of the USSR didn't just reverberate within its former borders. The shockwaves were felt globally. The bipolar world defined by the Cold War and the ideological battle between capitalism and communism came to an abrupt end. The United States emerged as the sole superpower, marking the onset of a new era of American dominance. Yet the end of the Cold War didn't mean the end of global conflict. Instead, the world saw a shift from ideological to ethnic and regional conflicts. The power vacuum left by the USSR gave rise to new disputes and power dynamics, as nations scrambled to fill the void. It's important to note that the aftermath of the USSR's collapse is still unfolding. The journey of these nations, their struggles and triumphs, are a testament to their resilience and adaptability. The fall of the USSR marked the end of an era, reshaping the world as we know it. The collapse of the USSR was a complex and multifaceted event, a culmination of years of internal struggles and external pressures. We journeyed through the unraveling of this behemoth, from the initial seeds of dissent that sprouted in the hearts of its people to the transformative reforms under Gorbachev's leadership. We witnessed the final tumultuous years, a time of upheaval and uncertainty, leading to the eventual dissolution of the USSR. The aftermath of this monumental event resonates even today, shaping the geopolitical landscape of the modern world. The independent nations that emerged from the ashes of the USSR carry with them the legacy of their past, grappling with the challenges of their newfound sovereignty while striving to forge their own identities. The USSR's collapse serves as a stark reminder of the impermanence of even the most formidable empires. Who knows what the future holds for our world? That's a wrap for today, folks. If you enjoyed, tap that like button. Don't miss out on the fun. Subscribe to stay tuned. The excitement is just beginning.